Hey guys, Jake Steele, ironandsteel.com. This is podcast episode number 21. And as always, thank you very much for being here. It is greatly appreciated. I am coming to you from sunny Southern California this week. And it's been a long week. If I sound a little tired, it's because I am. It's been a bit of a whirlwind over the last 7 days or so. I'm currently in La Quinta, so like Palm Springs area, but left Portland, last Wednesday or whatever. Stopped at the California Hot Rod Reunion in Bakersfield, did that for a couple of days, but the main purpose of the trip was to attend Pat Ganal's Celebration of Life, which was in Van Nuys. And so anyway, it's been a long trip. I did the Celebration of Life day before yesterday. It was amazing. I'll touch on that at the end of the podcast and maybe the trip as a whole, but specifically Pat's event. It was pretty incredible. So anyway, I'm going to read a fairly quick story for this week. I don't know what to say about it. I wrote it several years ago. It's just kind of a reminder, a little chunk of advice. Seems a little bit maybe trivial, maybe it seems obvious to some guys, but when I originally wrote it years ago, I got a lot of feedback from it, and a lot of people went out of their way to comment and say that they found it really helpful, and it helped to kind of keep them on track. So the story is called 2 Hours a Night, and it's on ironandsteel.com. Speaking of which, while you're there, scroll to the bottom, hit the subscribe button, and punch in your email if you could. Just takes a second, and then you'll be kept up to date on new content. So, of course, we do this weekly podcast. Most often I do an article a week, sometimes an article every 2 weeks. But, so if you're on the list, that email list, I'll send you an email, maybe 2 a week, just to let you know that there's fresh content. So anyway, ironandsteel.com. If you could take 2 seconds and hit the subscribe button, that'd be great. But anyway, and again, this story is on the site. It's one of the first stories I wrote and published on it. So it's on the first page or whatever. But it is there if you want to check it out for yourself. But otherwise, just kick back and relax, and I'll read it to you. How do you eat an elephant? The answer is one bite at a time. And of all the old-timey expressions that I've heard, this seems to be the one that really rings true when it comes to doing things like building a hot rod. Whether you're working on your first project or your 10th, it is very easy to get distracted or to become overwhelmed by the scope of the task at hand. I've been there myself, many times in fact. There were countless projects that were abandoned by teenage and early 20s me. I'd become overwhelmed, disenchanted, or just downright pissed off, and I'd just give up. It sucks to admit it, but that really is the reality of my early hot rod career. A shitload of failures. The plus side is that hopefully someone can learn from my mistakes by taking a simple rule that I've learned and applying it to their lives. Ready? Here it is. 2 hours a night. Okay, so what the hell is that? I'm glad you asked. 2 hours a night is the simplest path to you driving down the road in a bitchin' hot rod that you never thought you'd be able to build. A bold statement? Maybe, but just hear me out. Now, I'm not smart enough to have invented this rule. And honestly, if left to my own devices early on, I'd have barely adhered to it. 2 hours a night came to me via my friend Robbie. And the shorthand version of the story is that I wanted to build this certain car. I had one lined up, I had the money to buy it, and I had all the big ideas in the world for it. The only problem was that I lacked the properly equipped space to do it in, not to mention a bunch of the specialized knowledge it was going to take to get the job done. Robbie offered me both a stall in his shop, as well as his brain to help me along through the process. But there were 2 rules. Number 1, set a goal for completion. And number 2, set aside 2 hours a night to dedicate to the project in order to reach that goal. Now, it may sound stupid, but those 2 things were like hearing the answer to a long pondered riddle. One that's answer was so obvious it was silly, and all I had to do was commit to it. And with my car taking up space in his shop, a certain level of urgency kind of forced that commitment. And that's when I figured out how helpful and easy this simple guideline really is. So, why is this 2 hours a night thing so important? It's simple. Being hands-on every day, even for just 2 hours, is the gateway to staying focused. It also encourages breaking up these enormous projects into smaller, more manageable tasks. This, in turn, makes the entire process more enjoyable. Now, most everyone probably already attacks their projects in a somewhat similar fashion, breaking things up into subcategories. But the mistake I see people making, and have made many times myself, is that they keep it too broad. They say things like, "All right, tonight I'll focus on the chassis." Well, that's great, but the rule of 2 hours a night requires a more specific and compartmentalized approach. Instead of going out to the garage to work aimlessly on one very generic, broad thing, break it into something very specific. Something like, tonight I'm going to make that bracket for my steering box and get it bolted in place. Simple. Setting goals and having a specific task in mind for the evening is enormously helpful when it comes to staying focused. I remember spending all day at work thinking about the 1 or 2 things that I knew I was going to do that night, and knowing that by the same time, the next day, I would be on to my next task. It became a ritual. Now, you may be asking, how am I supposed to find 2 extra hours every single night? Well, honestly, you are not going to. Sorry. You're going to have to make the time available. This is going to require you committing to giving something else up. Now, I'm sure you work and have a family and responsibilities and commitments just like everyone else, right? And I would also bet that just like everyone else, you likely fancy yourself a pretty busy guy. I did too. Here's the kicker. I wasn't. And honestly, neither are you. Look, if you want to take a good hard look at it, you're likely wasting a whole bunch of your time. That hour after work where you sit in your lounger and sulk about your day over a beer or 5, that's an hour that could be spent in the garage. You can even bring the beer with you. The hour you spend frantically scrolling through Instagram and Facebook to see what you missed all day, well, you're flushing an hour of garage time down the toilet so you can stare at other people's cars while wishing yours was as cool as theirs. Ironic? Yeah. Avoidable? You bet. Now, maybe I've got you all wrong. Maybe those examples don't apply to you the way they did me. Even so, I guarantee you, you have 2 hours available each night. Even if you have to split it up into 2 non-consecutive hours. 1 hour between the kids' baseball practice and going to bed an hour later is still 2 hours. You'll be surprised when you start really taking a look at what you're doing with your time. I know I was. Another important thing to remember is that if you somehow find yourself with more than 2 hours of time, don't fall into the trap. It's very easy to push too hard. This inevitably leads to burning yourself out. And the next day, on your way home from work, you're finding yourself saying shit like, man, I hammered on that thing until 2 a.m. last night. I'm not doing shit when I get home. Before you know it, you haven't worked on your car in 3 days. You don't remember where you left off or where you are, and your whole process has gone out the window. Now you're right back to winging it like a schmuck, just like I did for so long. So, take it all for what it's worth. All I can say is that it has been extremely helpful for me. It may not work for everyone, but I think it is an effective approach that is reasonable enough to apply to most of us. Some guys would rather make excuses. And these are the guys that are finding themselves spectating at car shows and drag races, and will be for a long time. The rest of us will be out driving and enjoying our old cars and answering the normies' questions of, how long did that take you to build? With, not long, just 2 hours a night. Okay, there you have it. 2 hours a night. Again, ironandsteel.com is the website. You can go there and check it out for yourself. I would recommend doing that. There are a lot of photos in that article. And in the story itself, when I'm talking about wanting to build a certain car and Robbie offering his shop space and his knowledge and the genesis of 2 hours a night, where that came from. And anyway, the car that I was applying that to was my 40 Willys pickup. So in the article itself, I included a shitload of photos of the process of building that truck. So for those of you that don't know, when I bought that thing, it was a running and driving truck that was just bone stock, and I blew it apart down to the bare frame. And long story short, the truck as it is now, the only thing that was on the original truck that I bought is the cab. So literally everything else is different. The frame was no good on the original truck. The bed was no good on the original truck. And once I started pulling it apart, everything had to be replaced. So anyway, I guess long story short, the process of building that truck from literally a frame on a table all the way through to completion, a lot of that process is documented on the website in that article, 2 hours a night. So if that's anything you're interested in, if you dig that truck or give a shit about seeing some of the process of its build, that's where you can find it. So anyway, I think I mentioned at the beginning, I'm in Southern California. We did come down here for Pat Ganal's memorial, and it was absolutely incredible and a little overwhelming. First of all, it was at Galpin, and the car collection there is out of this world. I mean, every car there is a historic car. They're all the real ones. There's no bullshit there. They're all heavy hitter cars, like the Hirohata Merc is there, and Orbitron and all these Roth cars, and it is absolutely overwhelming. For those of you not familiar, I did post probably 20 photos or so of the cars and things on on my Instagram account, so you can check those out there, but they do it absolutely no justice. I don't know what the program is there as far as visitors and stuff under normal circumstances, and I wouldn't want to speak out of turn, but I would just say, if you're a person that ever is able to find yourself inside that building, if you have that opportunity, you have to take it. It's absolutely indescribable, the cars that are there and the history that's there. Just the shit they have hanging on the walls is stuff that are stuffed away in a cabinet, in a corner or whatever. Like it's all top tier killer stuff of historical significance, and I don't even know what to say about it. It was it was definitely overwhelming, and it was awesome. So yeah, if you ever, have a chance to get inside there, I would highly recommend it. So that was one element. The other element of it was, really, it was kind of a who's who of car people, and then me for some reason. So a lot of the people you would expect would be at something like that were there. All very nice people, very gracious. It was interesting. Interesting night. The dynamic was something to be seen for sure, but everybody was super nice. Bill Ganal, Pat's son, was he was wearing a shirt that said, what did it say? It said, "Was my dad a dick to you?" And so that was kind of the tone of the night. The tone of the night was lighthearted, to be fun and to be a celebration and, to celebrate Pat Ganal. And so, that t-shirt, "Was my dad a dick to you?" He's kind of embracing the fact that, look, Pat Ganal, an icon, a legend, of course, he was not afraid to speak his mind, and to give his opinion, even if the situation maybe didn't dictate that was appropriate. But yeah, I guess you could say he was outspoken, very opinionated, and along the way, in some circles probably gained a reputation as being a little gruff because he didn't give a shit if he offended you. Well, I shouldn't say he didn't give a shit. I should say he didn't realize that something that he might say could offend you. So he would just say what's on his mind, and some people didn't like that. So anyway, Bill was wearing a shirt that said, "Was my dad a dick to you?" And it was kind of an icebreaker for people to come up and have conversations about Pat and some of their experiences, good, bad, or indifferent. And they had a video booth running too, where people could get in front of the camera and give their stories, tell their stories about Pat. And yeah, it was amazing. I don't know what else to say about it. The cars inside the actual building itself, of course, phenomenal, incredible. But the cars outside were just as amazing. I knew every car that was there on display outside. Very recognizable cars from, some very well-known people in our community. And it was awesome. I just, there were a lot of cars there that I hadn't seen in person before. And so I was really happy to be able to do that and meet some of these guys that, I only knew through Instagram or whatever. And everybody was just super nice, very gracious. And the theme of the night was just awesome. Highs and lows. There was some sad points, when guys were passing the mic around, and, Bill would give his speech, and Pat's wife gave a speech, and, to be expected at a celebration of life, some low points, not low in a bad way, but just, some sad moments. But overall, absolutely incredible. And I think that everybody involved did just an incredible job. And I was very humbled and appreciative to have been there. And it's an experience that I'll never forget. So yeah, long story short, I think it was a proper send-off for Pat Ganal and who he was, and everybody involved did a great job. So outside of that, let's see, on the way down here, I did stop at the California Hot Rod Reunion, which was, it's a little slow. It's not like years past, not like which I never went during the golden era, but yeah, apparently, kind of a shell of its former self, according to pretty much everyone that I talked to. That said, I still enjoyed myself. The swap meet was kind of so-so, but the drag racing's always great. There were some cool cars there too on display. So yeah, overall, I was happy to have gone to that. Will I make the drive specifically for that next year? If I think it's going to be the same as it was this year, probably not. But yeah, hopefully it was just an off year. Maybe next year will be a little better. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. So yeah, that's kind of the short version of my trip. And I'm going to start making my way back home here in a few days, maybe a week or so, and see if I can check out some car stuff along the way. I did find that there's a chili cook-off hot rod show at an air museum like 15 miles from me. So yeah, that checks a lot of boxes for me. So I'm gonna go check that out here shortly. But anyway, so yeah, that's that. I'm gonna skip the Q&A for this week just because we're right on time. We're running a little bit long even with where we are right now. So again, ironandsteel.com is the website. Go there and click subscribe. The other thing too is on the subject of Q&A, a lot of times I'll ask for questions and stuff on social media. Don't wait for me to prompt you. If you have questions, comments, or topics or whatever for this podcast, just reach out. Iron and Steel on Instagram. Jake at ironandsteel.com is my email address. So don't be shy. I'm always looking for different things to talk about, and I'll always read a story off of the website, which is the kind of the whole theme of the podcast. But I think people enjoy the Q&A and just the back and forth of just regular stuff too. So I'm always looking for different things to talk about. So feel free to get a hold of me and let me know what you're thinking. So I'm rambling. So I think for this week we're going to say our goodbyes, and yeah, get a hold of me if you have some ideas. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a good week, and I'll talk to you again in exactly 7 days.